They laughed when the human delegation stood up, not politely, not nervously. They laughed the way old empires laugh at small storms, confident the thunder will pass, certain the sky belongs to them. Ambassador Lena Ortiz waded through it anyway, hands folded behind her back, gaze level, expression calm in the pale glow of the conquered hall. Around her, tier upon tier of alien representatives gleamed under drifting banners of the interstellar accord. Scaled ministers wrapped in ceremonial metals, translucent hive speakers humming in synchronized clusters, machine envoys flickering with legal glyphs. At the center, suspended in gravity-neutral silence, rotated the charter sphere, 2 centuries of law, compromise, and selective memory. Lena spoke when the laughter thinned. "By authority of the Unified Nations Assembly," she said, voice carried to every translation node, humanity formally withdraws from the Stellar Council, effective immediately. Now they stopped laughing. For 3 full heartbeats no one moved. Then the chamber erupted. You could not call it one sound. It was 100 species protesting in 100 anatomies. Wing plates snapping, resonance sacs booming, signal light storms strobing across machine chassis. A Varan consul hissed for sanctions. A Keth magistrate demanded seizure of all human deep space assets, pending compliance review. The Barrel Choir projected legal precedent from 27 archive disputes in under half a second. Lena didn't blink. She placed a silver data rod on the central stand. Our departure packet includes transit lane dissolution schedules, contract terminations, and emergency communication protocols valid for 90 council days. After that, all relations become bilateral. "You cannot dissolve lane rights unilaterally," barked chair-being yell of the council secretariat, 4 jaws moving in disciplinary rhythm. "Those corridors are council-administered." "Those corridors," Lena replied, "were designed, built, and maintained by Human Logistics Corps under lease contracts you declined to renew unless we accepted revised voting caps and tariff penalties. We decline." Someone shouted, "This is blackmail." "No," Lena said. "This is paperwork." The data rod pulsed once, confirming transfer. Then she turned, and 12 human delegates walked out of Concord Hall in perfect silence while half the known species screamed behind them. One on Earth, no sirens sounded. That was the part historians would argue over later. No declaration of emergency, no mass panic, no triumphant fireworks. The day humanity left the council looked, to most people, like a Tuesday with better weather. Cargo pilots got rerouted memos. Port authorities received revised docking standards. Interstellar insurers sent sternly worded notices with 14 attachments. Farmers on Ceres checked fuel prices. A teacher in Nairobi postponed a civics quiz because half the class wanted to debate whether independence meant freedom or being blamed for everything. President Amara Ndilavu addressed the planet from a quiet room with a single flag behind her. "We did not leave because cooperation failed," she said. "We left because coercion replaced cooperation. We will trade. We will negotiate. We will rescue in disaster. But we will not be governed by a body that taxes our roots, limits our vote by population algorithm, and rewrites security obligations while expecting our fleets to enforce them." She paused, then added, "If anyone expects us to collapse without council permission, they have not met us." Clips of that line spread through human networks in minutes. Clips of the council shouting spread through everyone else's. 2 at first, Nothing obvious happened. Then, 4 days later, 37 cargo convoys stalled at the Lattice Junction near Tau Ceti because their council-certified pathfinding keys no longer matched local beacon firmware. The firmware had been written by a human subcontractor 21 years earlier. The subcontractor no longer existed. The code comments were in 3 languages and one programmer's sarcasm. By day 7, Doc strikes hit Hellion Prime when medical isotopes arrived spoiled. The isotopes had taken a detour around a human-maintained fast lane that now required new navigation bonds. No one had processed them in time. By day 10, the Council's anti-piracy patrol map went dark across 2 spiral sectors, not because human ships were attacking anyone. Because human ships had quietly constituted 42% of long-range escort capacity, 70% in high-risk belts, and 93% in one cursed corridor known as Needle's Throat, where insurance companies charged fees normally associated with volcanoes. By day 12, 3 council members submitted emergency motions to temporarily restore cooperative privileges with the Human Union under revised compliance language. In plain speech, please come back and fix this. The motion died in committee. The old bloc still believed it was a bluff. 3 Captain Rourke Baines of the civilian freighter Copper Finch was halfway through a bad cup of coffee when the distress ping hit his bridge. Unknown vessel, partial hull loss, life support critical, origin council registry. His first officer, Min Jai Park, glanced up. That's inside the former Accord lane. Now bilateral, Rourke said. Still a mayday. He sighed, set down the coffee like it had personally offended him, and opened emergency channel. This is human merchant vessel Copper Finch. We copy your distress. Transmit casualty count. Static. Then a thin, harmonized voice, 3 throats speaking in painful unison. 42 survivors. Reactor breach contained. We request any assistance, please. Rourke tapped regulations on his console. Human maritime law was clear. Distress superseded politics, always had. He keyed engines. Hold together. We're inbound. They reached the crippled ship in 19 minutes. It was a Talarian courier, ribs peeled open, atmosphere venting glitter into space. The Finch crew spent 6 hours in hard suits cutting trapped passengers out of collapsed transit tubes while the Talarian captain, bleeding blue through a cracked helm, kept repeating one disbelieving sentence. I was told humans no longer answer council calls. Rourke didn't bother looking up. You called for help, not permission. The rescue made every net in 3 quadrants by nightfall. Council pundits called it a calculated image campaign. Human commentators called that a silly theory because nobody stages real decompression injuries for public relations. The rescued Talarians called it survival. Still, something shifted, quietly, uncomfortably. For the sabotage began on day 15, not by humans, by opportunists. When large systems wobble, parasites smell blood. A coordinated pirate consortium hit grain fleets in the Perseus Reach using spoofed council transponder keys sold on black markets that had never existed when human cryptographers still managed Accord authentication. Colonial food reserves dropped to 9 days. In 2 fringe systems, governors armed civilian haulers and called them militias. At the same time, a wave of false orders redirected hospital ships away from plague zones. Someone was exploiting council bureaucracy lag. Too many agencies, Too many signatures, not enough people who understood the underlying network. In Concord Hall, the emergency stability session devolved into accusations before the opening bell. "The humans engineered this to prove indispensability," shrieked Minister Vec. "They walked away and left traps in their systems," snapped another. Machine Envoy 9A Blue projected a forensic report. Counterclaim unsupported. Unauthorized exploits correspond to previously reported vulnerabilities deferred by Council budget vote. Deferred by 12 votes to fund ceremonial expansion of the hall. No one mentioned that aloud. Chair being yelled did what weak leaders do when systems fail, formed a task force. 3 hours later, the task force requested direct technical consultation from Earth. 5 Earth replied in 17 minutes. "We will provide humanitarian and anti-piracy assistance under bilateral agreements. We will not return to Council jurisdiction. Technical support requires open data access, independent audit rights, and non-retaliation guarantees for participating human contractors." Half the council called the terms insulting. The other half called them sane. A vote to reject passed by 2. 48 hours later, famine riots on Marin 4 killed 200 civilians when ration convoys failed to arrive through a jammed relay gate that had not been serviced in 14 months because the servicing team used to be human, and the replacement bid had been delayed by, yes, committee review. A second vote to reject failed by 15. The council sent envoys. 6. The envoys did not come to Earth first. Protocol demanded neutral ground, so they met at Pelagos Station, a spinning cylinder of glass and old grudges parked in the dark between systems. The station smelled like recycled air and expensive diplomacy. Ambassador Lena Ortiz took the meeting in a plain gray suit with no insignia. Across from her sat a mixed delegation led by Council Vice Chair Rel, a lean, silver-skinned strategist famous for winning negotiations by never appearing to want anything. Rel began with no greeting. "You enjoy this." Lena tilted her head. "Enjoy what? Our need." Lena slid a tablet across the table. Live casualty maps bloomed in red over 3 sectors. "I don't enjoy preventable deaths, that's why I'm here." Rel's secondary eyelids flickered. "Then return. No, reform from within. We tried for 32 years. Compromise. Compromise is not the same as surrender with prettier grammar." The room cooled 2 degrees. Rel leaned forward. "You understand if the council fractures, war follows." Lena held his gaze. "Then stop acting like a throne and start acting like an alliance." For a long time, nobody spoke. Then a junior envoy from the agricultural worlds, young, exhausted, clearly not supposed to speak, blurred, "My homeworld has 6 days of protein stock. I don't care whose pride survives. I care whether children eat." It broke the theater. Talks turned practical. By dawn station time, they signed the Pelagos protocols. Temporary shared corridor operations, emergency authentication exchange, joint anti-piracy sweeps, and independent monitoring teams staffed by species that had never gotten near council power before. The old guard called it capitulation. Border colonies called it hope. 7. The universe did not calm. It convulsed. Because once one taboo breaks, others follow. Within 2 weeks of Pelagos, 4 mid-tier powers announced they would review and potentially suspend mandatory council arbitration. Two protectorate systems demanded full voting rights or tax strikes. Three machine polities released a joint statement arguing legal personhood rules were centuries out of date and therefore non-binding. A trade bloc threatened to create a rival standards body unless transit tariffs were rewritten by actual economists, not hereditary title holders. Concord Hall sessions ran 20 hours and solved nothing except how loudly civilized beings could shout. Media outlets called it the fracture. Fringe nets called it liberation. Extremist groups called it recruitment season. Through all of it, human policy stayed boring. Respond to distress, protect shipping, negotiate bilaterally, refuse re-entry to the old structure. Boring was infuriating to people who wanted villains. 8 on the mining moon Carpath. A council loyalist militia seized the orbital elevator and announced emergency authority until constitutional order is restored. Constitutional order meant their tax exemptions. Carpath supplied iridium composites used in life support membranes. If shipments stopped, clinics across 9 systems would run out in 12 days. The local governor sent panic calls everywhere. Council Naval Command debated legal mandate for 11 hours. Human Rescue Fleet Task Group Orion launched in 20 minutes. Commander Imani Shah stood on the bridge of the UNS Resolute, watching tactical overlays bloom. Militia drones ringed the elevator spine. Civilian workers were trapped inside maintenance decks. Any heavy strike risked depressurizing thousands. A council liaison on encrypted channel demanded command access under old Accord emergency law. Imani muted him. Status. 12 assault boats ready, said operations. Signal interference heavy. They're spoofing friend or foe tags. Of course they are. Imani opened broadcast. Carpath Militia Command, this is Task Group Orion. You are endangering civilian infrastructure. Stand down and prepare to disarm. Laughter crackled back. You don't have jurisdiction, Imani sighed. I have thrusters and patience, and one of those is limited. The militia fired first. Orion drones surged in silent arcs, not to destroy but to blind. Laser arrays clipped targeting pods, breaching charges severed weapon mounts, jamming buoys flooded comm bands with handshake resets that made stolen drones forget who owned them. Boarding teams entered through coolant ducts and maintenance locks, stun pulses first, cuffs second. 17 minutes later, elevator control returned to civilian hands. Imani reopened channel to council liaison. Infrastructure secured, medical teams en route. The liaison's voice came tight. Under whose authority? Imani looked out at Carpath's thin dawn. Under the authority of people needing to breathe. 9. The old council did not fall in one dramatic night. Institutions rarely do. They hollow. By the time the 7th Emergency Summit convened, half the seats were filled by delegates carrying conditional mandates. We stay only if reforms pass. The other half carried threats disguised as amendments. Chair being yell opened with ceremony. Nobody listened. Then came the speech no one expected from Vice Chair Rel, architect of 1,000 procedural victories, defender of the system to his last elegant breath. He stood beneath the charter sphere and said, "We mistook endurance for legitimacy." The hall went dead. Rel continued, "We believed continuity itself was virtue, even as corridors failed, food spoiled, and citizens learned they were represented only when convenient. We asked partners for loyalty while revising their rights without consent. We called dependence cooperation because the word felt kinder. He turned toward the human delegation gallery where Lena sat among observers with no vote. When humanity withdrew, we called it betrayal. In truth, it was diagnosis. 3 blocks walked out before he finished, but enough stayed. Over the next 31 days, they passed what history would name the Pelagos reforms: weighted protections for minor worlds, transparent budget audits, independent infrastructure authority, emergency response obligations detached from political compliance, and a hard limit on executive decrees. Most importantly, membership became modular. No species would again be forced into full jurisdiction to cooperate on shared survival systems. The Stellar Council renamed itself the Interstellar Compact. The old banners came down. No one cried for them. 10 months later, at a freight bar on Luna where the drinks were overpriced and the chairs hated vertebrates, Captain Rourke Baines watched a newsfeed without sound. On-screen, diplomats signed the Compact Transit Accord while a caption crawled beneath: Human Union joins as founding partner, non-jurisdictional tier. Min Jai set down 2 glasses. You seeing this? Hard to miss. She sat. So we left the council. Universe went mad. Then everybody rebuilt it around the parts that actually worked. Rourke lifted his drink. That's one version. What's yours? He thought about the Talarian courier, Carpath's trapped workers, grain ships threading pirate belts while lawyers argued definitions of sovereignty. Lena at Pelagos, calm as stone while systems burned. He shrugged. Systems forget their tools, then people remind them. Min Jai clinked his glass. Poetic for a cargo captain. Don't tell anyone. Ruins my brand. Above the bar, the feed shifted to raw footage from Concord Hall archives. That first day, the laughter, Lena placing the data rod, humans walking out while the chamber roared. The clip had gone from scandal to meme to textbook in under a year. Now students studied it under a new civics chapter title: Exit as Leverage, the Human Precedent. 11 in a classroom on Marin 4, the world that nearly starved. A teacher asked her mixed-species students a question. Why did the fracture happen? Hands rose. Because humans wanted power. Because the council was corrupt. Because pirates exploited the chaos. Because everyone panicked. She nodded at each, then wrote on the board: Dependence plus disrespect equals instability. Humanity built critical systems, she said. Then the old council treated them as permanently obligated but politically containable. That equation was always unstable. Withdrawal exposed it. Opportunists accelerated it. Reform survived only when leaders accepted interdependence and limits. A small, green-scaled student frowned. So humans were right, the teacher smiled tiredly. In politics, right is often less useful than responsible. They left. They still answered distress calls. Remember both parts. She added a second line. Sovereignty without solidarity is a siege. Solidarity without sovereignty is a cage. 12 Lena Ortiz stood once more in Concord Hall, no longer Concord officially, but everyone still called it that when they wanted to remember. The charter sphere was gone. In its place floated a web of linked nodes, each representing a functional compact: transit, health, anti-piracy, disaster response, arbitration, science exchange. Participants opted in by domain, terms public, audits automatic. Messier than empire, safer than trust alone. Rel approached from her left, carrying age in his posture like formal attire. You were impossible, he said. You were insufferable. He made the closest thing his species had to a laugh. And yet here we are. Below them, delegates argued over methane shipping limits and biosphere contamination fines. Ordinary, tedious, necessary arguments. Nobody screamed about existential betrayal. Nobody threatened sanctions over procedural punctuation. Lena watched a young representative from a former protectorate challenge a major power's data claim and win on evidence. No backroom veto, no ancestral title override, just numbers, open ledgers, and grudging compliance. Rel followed her gaze. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had called your bluff? Lena looked at the node web, then back at him. We weren't bluffing. 13. There are stories civilizations tell about themselves because they are flattering, and there are stories they keep because they are useful. The flattering version of the fracture said one side was noble and the other wicked, one species brave and the rest foolish, one decision destined and clean. The useful version was uglier. A dominant institution overreached. A dependent partner refused coercion. Infrastructure proved more political than ideology. Criminals exploited turbulence. Civilians paid first. Reluctant cooperation returned before pride did. Reform came not from enlightenment but from sustained inconvenience, visible casualties, and people too stubborn to confuse tradition with virtue. Humanity did not save the universe. Humanity disrupted a failing arrangement and kept showing up where lives were on the line. That difference mattered. 14 years later, when new delegates toured Hall Station, guides paused at a preserved exhibit, a silver data rod inside a glass field, labeled simply, Instrument of Withdrawal Human Union, Session 4421. The guide would say, this object marked the end of the old council era. A student would inevitably ask, why is it so small? And the guide would answer, because collapse often begins with a quiet, administratively valid sentence. Then, if the group seemed thoughtful enough, the guide added the line older diplomats still repeated over bitter coffee and reluctant respect. They mocked humanity until humanity left. Then the galaxy discovered which parts of civilization were load-bearing. 15 on Earth, it was another Tuesday. Cargo moved. Hospitals received membranes on time. Piracy reports trended down for the 12th quarter. The Compact's dispute boards were still slow, still imperfect, still maddeningly bureaucratic, proof that shared governance survived mostly by being tedious enough to prevent anyone from turning it into a throne. President Ndi Lovu, older now, gave a brief interview and was asked whether leaving the council had been worth the risk. She answered without drama. We didn't leave to watch it burn. We left so we wouldn't burn with it. The reporter asked, and now? Now we do what we should have done from the start, she said. Build systems where cooperation is chosen, accountability is visible, and no one mistakes dependence for obedience. Outside, rain hit the windows in patient rhythms. Inside, analysts argued over freight percentages and corridor maintenance budgets, and whether the new arbitration timelines were too generous to large exporters. Civilization, in other words, continued, not because madness never came, because enough people survived it and learned.